today in the battleground state of Pennsylvania could affect the outcome of the presidential race. He rejected a challenge to a controversial voter ID law. Our crime and justice correspondent Joe Johns has been looking into this story for us, and a lot of viewers aren't familiar with what's going on, so update us on the latest developments.
That's true, Wolf. Well, it's making headlines in Pennsylvania today, but it's also something to keep your eye on across the country as we get closer to Election Day. Legislatures in key swing states like Pennsylvania have been tweaking the voter laws, and now we're seeing more and more pushback in the courts as voters start asking why. Emotional battle over voting rights this election year. More than a dozen states have passed new voting rights laws, including the one in the swing state of Pennsylvania, which is requiring people to show photo ID in order to vote. Opponents went to court to try to block the law, saying it could disenfranchise up to 100,000 people, especially minorities and older or sick voters, who are more likely not to have acceptable photo identification. People like 93-year-old Vivette Applewhite, one of the lead plaintiffs in the case.
And I just think it's terrible because there's so many people that don't have ID and they're not going to be able to vote.
Republican Commonwealth Judge Robert Simpson ruled that the opponents trying to keep the law from being enforced did not establish that disenfranchisement of voters was immediate or inevitable. In Harrisburg, the legislator who wrote the law said disenfranchisement was never intended.
The only people it disenfranchises are those individuals who are trying to perpetrate election fraud.
But the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania acknowledges that it would not be able to prove a lot of voter if it tried. Pennsylvania is also the state where a top GOP legislator recently seemed to suggest the voter law would help Republicans win back the White House this fall.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Opponents say it just shows something other than fraud motivated the legislation.
That in the past decade, that they have found only about 10 instances of in-person voter fraud. And those were mostly instances where people were simply confused and didn't know what the rules were in their area.
So this is about voter suppression in your view?
And in my view, and in the view of the Brennan Center, this is about keeping certain voters from the polls.
The Justice Department now is studying the Pennsylvania law, which Representative Metcalf, the author of the law, claims is a waste of time.
Well, I think it's a fishing expedition where they're really overreaching. They've demanded documents that from us through our Department of Transportation, demanded information that many Pennsylvanians would object to.
Lawyers for the opponents of the Pennsylvania law will be asking for an expedited appeal. They say the lower court should have applied a stricter standard of review to the government action in this case, but the court did not do that. And by the way, Wolf, I'm working on an investigative report, an hour-long investigative report for October on this issue of changes of voter laws in the states.
What other states are you looking at? Because there's a bunch of these laws out there.
There are a bunch of them, and you just sort of have to narrow it down. We're taking a very close look at Florida, but there's a number of other states. There's Ohio, there's Wisconsin, there's Texas, there's South Carolina. This dynamic is at play in all of those states.
If it's a close election, this could have a serious impact on the outcome.
Absolutely. Just a few 100,000 votes could make all the difference.
You remember Florida 2000, 35 votes carried the state for President.
Hanging chads.
Then candidate Bush.
Right.
Thanks very much.